A lot of people sent me this video and a few others from this guy named Patrick Boyle, who is a hedge fund manager from the UK who has kind of gone rogue off of kind of the things he normally talks about into spreading some of the fear, uncertainty, doubt around electric vehicles. So today we're going to take a look at his latest video and see if he's just right about this stuff, or maybe if there's a few things that he needs some help understanding better. Let's dive in.
US consumers bought just under 16 million new cars in 2024, which is 2.2% more than the prior year and a new sales record since the pandemic. Most automakers did well as they adjusted to slowing demand for EVs and focused on their core business in the United States of gasoline-powered trucks and SUVs.
Actually, Patrick, the opposite is true. If it weren't for EVs, GM and Ford would have had a really rough year. In 2024, we hit an all-time high of EV sales in the US of 1.3 million, with Q4 having a 15.2% year-over-year increase in sales. And where you're at in the UK, Patrick, you might want to be a little bit more careful about the words you choose here, because you can actually get sued like the Times did and lost on their recent article claiming that EV sales demand was falling in the UK, when in fact it wasn't. It was increasing. And in the complaint specifically, they said that the article was inaccurate in breach of Clause 1. It said that demand for electric vehicles was not falling, but rising. The complaint provided that sales data from the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, SMMT, available at the time of the article's publication to support this position. The complaint said that the data showed electric vehicle sales in August 2024 were 10.8% higher compared to August 2023, and that the new EV sales in 2024 so far were 10.5% higher compared to the same period in 2023. The complaint acknowledged that the reference to fall in demand might have referred to hybrid vehicle sales. However, it said this was unlikely and that demand for hybrids was also rising overall. Last year, I reviewed Segway Navamo's Robotic lawnmower, and it completely blew me away with how well it works. This is the kind of AI that I want in my life. And this year, Segway has really outdone themselves with the new Navamo X3 series, and I'm still kind of amazed. The Navamo X3 brings precision and intelligence to a whole new level. With its 3.0 technology, it delivers pinpoint accuracy, extended signal coverage, and AI-powered assist mapping, all without the hassle of perimeter wires. It's perfect for anyone who wants their weekends back. And as a parent, I'm sure your yard is like mine, littered with toys and obstacles all over the place. And the Navamo X3 navigates them effortlessly thanks to its advanced Vision plus RTK positioning system. It's a lawn care assistant that works smarter than both you or I actually could. And it's not just efficient, it's eco-friendly too. Navamo minimizes environmental impact while keeping your lawn pristine. From smaller yards to complex landscapes, there is a Navamo for every home. Segway's Navamo X3 series is smart, sustainable, and the stress-free solution that your lawn deserves. Experience the future of lawn care today. So learn more at the link down in the description, and thanks Navamo for sponsoring this video.
General Motors and Ford both reported their best year of US sales since the pandemic, as lower interest rates, higher inventory, and dealer incentives persuaded shoppers to buy.
Yes, GM and Ford actually did good in 2024, but it wasn't due to their trucks. It was due to their hybrid and EV sales, which grew at a combined rate of 38% year over year. Meanwhile, their combustible vehicle sales were basically flat, with only an increase of 0.2%. Had you looked at the data and just went one click beyond that headline to learn the real facts here, you would know that. And there's probably not a better data point to highlight this fact that in 2024, the electric Mustang outsold the gas version for the first time. So now owning a Stang means having an EV. And I'm sure a lot of people are upset about that. But again, the facts don't care about your feelings.
Despite Tesla's stock price rising more than 70% in 2024, the number of vehicles they sold fell by 1%. This was their first sales decline in more than a decade, and it came in a year when their much-hyped truck was introduced, which is supposed to be more in line with American vehicle purchasing trends than the sedans that they've been selling up until now.
Yeah, he's just flat out wrong about that one. The Tesla Model Y is by far their most popular model, which is an SUV, not a truck. And it could very well be the most popular car worldwide in 2024, as it was in 2023, beating out the Toyota Corolla. And in the US, the Model Y is just behind the RAV4 in rankings at the fourth most popular vehicle of any type. And just to clarify, yes, sales were down for Tesla by a net of about 1%. And that's one data point. That's not a trend. In 2025, we're going to see a whole new world. So we really can't know what's going to happen yet. But of course, he's just trying to pick apart one little cherry pick data point and use that to spin up a whole narrative, which just isn't reality when you look at the data.
Auto manufacturers stepped up their R&D spend massively over the last 10 years, spending tens of billions of dollars developing electric vehicles and self-driving technologies, with little to no short to medium-term returns on their investments. As the growth in demand for EVs appears to be waning, is electrification killing the car industry?
Thanks for asking, Patrick. No, is the answer to your question, as was actually proven in the courts over in the UK. So again, be careful when you say those things. If demand for EVs was waning, we wouldn't see a 25% increase to over 17 million sales worldwide, a new record yet again. But to answer the question about the industry, we need to look at the ratio of combustible vehicle sales to electric vehicle sales. And when we do that, we find that in 2017, the world saw peak combustible vehicle sales, and since then, their market share has been declining every single year, with all the growth in the auto sector coming from electric vehicles. So, no, EVs are not killing the auto industry. They represent the only growth sector, which is why companies like Stellantis that were slow to embrace electrification have struggled so mightily lately.
The pace of US car sales picked up towards the end of 2024 as falling interest rates and improved dealer inventories attracted shoppers. There was a lot of talk after the US election that EV buyers would rush out to take advantage of the Biden-era electric vehicle tax credits, which are worth up to $7,500 before they possibly go away, as Trump promised to eliminate these incentives on the campaign trail. There was a small pop in EV sales in December, with General Motors doing quite well. But if that's what a rush looks like, what will sales be like without the government incentives in place?
Two things. First, the incoming and forever president here in the U.S. has asked Congress to come up with one massive bill of legislation to push through all the stuff that they're wanting to do. So, assuming the government abides by existing laws and traditions, that means it will likely take months or even over a year before that bill is finally all crafted and combined together and passed. And because the EV tax credit was passed by Congress, Trump can't just wave it away with an executive order, or at least not legally, he can't. But what will happen to EV sales without the tax credit? Well, for one, it will severely hurt U.S. automakers' ability to compete on the world stage. This is why the big automakers are pleading with Trump to keep these regulations and these incentives in place. Without them, they'll lose bigly to the pure EV makers like Tesla, Rivian, and Lucid. And if any of these Chinese brands make their way to the States, it really could be game over for the legacy automakers, forcing them to merge with each other just to stay alive. I mean, could you imagine a GM and Ford merger? What would everybody do with their Chevy Silverados? Okay, I'm kidding. But so in that way, I suppose the answer could be yes to the previous question. But really, it's more like the government pushback to EVs is going to kill the auto industry, not the other way around.
The biggest success in EV adoption globally has, of course, been Norway, where 90% of new sales are electric. This was achieved through massive government incentives, where EV subsidies make up 2% of Norway's national budget. According to Vox, one of the negative side effects of the EV subsidies in Norway is that they've made driving so cheap that fewer people use public transportation, bicycles, or walk. Norway today has one of the lowest rates of public transportation usage in Europe and a higher car ownership rate than Denmark and Sweden, its Scandinavian neighbours.
Wrongo again, Mr. Boyle. Public transportation in Norway is primarily done by bus, and since 2008, it has mostly remained flat. There, of course, was a significant drop in 2020 because, checks math, global pandemic. But in 2021 and as of 2022, the number of passenger kilometers traveled by bus is again above 6 billion, basically the same that it was back in 2008. Hardly a decrease, and even those bus fleets are now going electric, making them even better for the climate and the environment locally. And before the smooth brains out there start claiming that switching these buses to electric led to millions of people being stranded because they broke down, that's not true either. The company that runs these electric bus lines were delaying some departures due to charging issues that they had that they didn't plan for previous to their first winter. So those issues have been fixed, and since then these issues are completely gone. Again, it's trying to look at something that is a challenge and blow that way out of proportion and act like we must stop what we're doing instead of looking at a problem and thinking that there's a way to overcome it, which is always how technology works. No matter what you're looking at, there's going to be challenges, and it's a matter of whether or not you can overcome them easily and efficiently, and in this case, that is exactly what happened. And this also should hopefully disprove this narrative that EVs don't work in the cold. I mean, if they can work at minus 20 degrees Celsius in snow in Norway, I think they can pretty much work anywhere. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Leave me a comment and let me know if there's somewhere else that has more difficult cold weather to deal with than Norway.
EV subsidies have been found to really move the needle. In Germany, electric vehicle sales dropped almost 40% last year when the German government ended its €6,000 EV subsidy.
The reality was it was a 27.4% drop, nowhere near 40%. That's a lie.
In 2022, Sweden eliminated a number of EV subsidies, which resulted in a 20% drop in electric vehicle sales.
Sure, you take away incentives and you see a dip in sales. That's to be expected. But it's important to realize that in 2022, over 60% of new car sales in Sweden were electric. And since that dip, the market has been on a rebound, with current estimates that the EV market will continue to grow at a compound annual growth rate of 13.67% from 2024 to 2029. Now, what this tells us is that the people in Sweden want EVs, and while some did decide to either hold off from buying or against buying once those incentives went away, far more people since then have decided to make the switch to an electric vehicle. This is why it's so important to look at more than just one snapshot in time to understand what's happening in a market. Now, as a hedge fund manager, you'd think Patrick would know this, but maybe they do things differently over there.
A huge problem affecting the demand for new EVs is the terrible depreciation buyers are hit with. I made a video last year on how many EVs have more than halved in value over their first year of ownership. It'll take quite a while to recover that kind of loss with fuel savings.
Well, it's not just fuel savings, Patrick. There's lots of other ways that you end up saving money here. But if you rethink the problem, Tesla, which dominates the EV market in the US, which is where the stat he's quoting comes from, has a tendency to change their prices of new EVs sporadically up and down. Now, obviously, if you just bought a new EV and then the day later the automaker dropped the price by 10%, your brand new EV is going to be worth far less than it was a day ago. And this may also lead to distrust of a brand doing such a thing, again, dragging down the entire market. And this isn't how most automakers work, but since Tesla is such a dominant player here in the US, they absolutely have an outsized impact on the rest of the market. But really, I think we should see the depreciation here as a good thing. That's for a brand new vehicle, and buying a brand new vehicle has and always will be a bad financial decision. This is why we've seen such a huge uptick in leases for new EVs, which don't suffer the same problem of depreciation. And it's also why we've seen a 60% jump in used EV sales year over year. The net of it is, for most people that are smart with their money, they get a better product at a better price. If you want new, you either have a specific use case or you're so rich that you don't care about the money to begin with. Either way, this is a good thing for EV adoption, as the vast majority of people should and are buying used cars, which are just a great value.
The change from ICE cars to EVs is mostly a minor one for consumers. The new cars serve the same purpose as the old ones did and mostly work the same, other than having a huge screen on the dashboard to distract the driver.
I honestly can't disagree more with this insane line of thinking. If you've never been in an EV, you go get in one, and I guarantee you're going to have a smile from ear to ear. And if you get in a really cool one, like a high performance one, it is going to blow your mind. But again, he's a hedge fund manager from the UK, so I wouldn't expect critical thinking to be one of his skills.
For manufacturers, the transition is much more complicated. All of the intellectual property that they've built up from decades of manufacturing mechanical cars loses its value when they move to building EVs.
Wait, I thought you just said that basically gas cars and electric cars are the same. Now they're completely different and have nothing in common? He's contradicting himself yet again here.
For this reason, governments are forced to weigh their commitments to workers and voters in their countries against their commitments to the Paris Climate Accords. In recent months, a number of major automakers have announced plans to slow their transition to electric vehicles. Volvo announced that they wouldn't move as quickly as planned to an all-EV lineup, and both Ford and General Motors said that they would delay the introduction of previously announced models.
Is it not obvious why the US automakers might be slowing their rollout of EVs? It should be obvious, right? I mean, the uncertainty here causes all kinds of problems for business. And that's, again, why they're actually asking Trump to keep all the things that are in place. Otherwise, they're going to completely lose out on the investments they've already made.
A big dilemma for politicians is that while they want cheaper EVs for environmental reasons, they don't want to undermine their domestic auto manufacturers or local employment by importing them from abroad. Governments so far are not backing down on their mandates, but they are equally not willing to see their manufacturing industries be wiped out by cheap Chinese imports.
This is a good point, and I think he's got it mostly right here. The thing is, though, that it's not everywhere. For example, in many parts of the world, the only choice is to import cars. So as a result, there's no protectionist agenda like we see here in the West. And in those areas, you guessed it, EVs are dominating the market, especially those cheap EVs coming over from China, which are often a full 50% or more cheaper than their gas counterparts. But the bigger point here, I believe, is that by putting up protectionist strategies like high tariffs or flat out bans on imports from certain countries, it really puts the local automakers in those countries at a major disadvantage in the long run. As we've seen for centuries, governments can't stop the advancement of technology no matter how hard they try. And in the end, the tech wins and the governments lose. So the right strategy might be to sort of embrace and work with those companies that are so far ahead and adopt what they've done to try to compete with them on a level playing field.
A change in direction from governments would be extremely difficult for big businesses, as governments have encouraged companies to install things like charging infrastructure or to mine for minerals needed for batteries. If governments change direction, a lot of this investment could become worthless.
But to his point, these automakers have made massive investments and they can't easily go back on them now. This is how China has been able to achieve such amazing cost efficiencies. In 2000, they realized that they couldn't compete on making combustible vehicles, so they decided to make a massive bet that EVs would be the future. And just ask any engineer that's looked at this, and they will tell you that EVs are by far the better design, especially when it comes to energy efficiency. And lucky for them, they were right. So if the rest of the world's auto markets want to compete with what China is objectively super far ahead of everyone else at, they're going to have to continue down this path of incentivizing these companies to push forward. Otherwise, they could go the way of the BlackBerrys and Blockbusters of the world. To answer the question he posed at the beginning, asking if electrification is killing the auto industry, the data certainly doesn't support that theory, at least not when you look at more than a single data point, which he did several times here. But the broader question, I think, is that if these governments keep employing these anti-free market protectionist strategies, is that going to kill their local auto industry? Because again, governments have never been able to stop the progress of a technology, and they certainly aren't going to be able to do that now. So the only way forward that I see is to embrace electrification and, if anything, incentivize your auto industry to continue to innovate and hopefully out-innovate all of the other foreign competitors. Because that right there there is a solution to this problem that I think all of us would love to see. Better products, better options, better prices for consumers in something that is just objectively better for our environment. And if you've made it this far, you have to go check out this video over here where I took a deep dive into the difference between subsidies for the EV market versus the fossil fuel industry. Members, you know where to find me. And that's it for this one, guys. Thanks for watching as always. I will see you back here next time.